Hi everyone, it's Rachel back with the Shades of Orange. Today I'm here to do, surprise, surprise, another round of recent reads. I read 2 horror books and 2 thrillers, 2 of which I loved and 2 that I didn't. All that being said, let's get started. First, let's talk horror, and I read Coldbrook by Tim Lebbon. This is a story about a group of scientists that are working on a secret project in the Appalachian Mountains. And before I go any further, I want to say that everything I'm about to tell you, you find out on the back of the book and probably within the first 20 to 25 pages. So no spoilers here, but you find out that these scientists are working on a project to try to burrow into another version of Earth. They believe in a multiverse theory and are trying to use quantum mechanics to find an alternate Earth. And at the beginning of the story, they are successful and they are able to drill a hole into another world and are starting to bring back little things like insects. However, something goes terribly wrong and they bring back something they shouldn't, and a disease breaks out that has zombie-like qualities. And I really enjoyed this one. I have become a bit burnt out on the zombie fiction genre. I enjoy it, but I've read those stories so many times and most of them follow a very familiar narrative. And this one was the exception because it was very different. You know me, I really like when my horror has elements of science fiction because I also love that genre. And that was really what made this book so much more enticing, because while I enjoyed the horror aspects to this book, certainly there's lots of kill scenes and gruesome moments and action, but at the same time, I found the quantum mechanic aspect of this book fascinating. You get to delve into exploring another world, and I thought it was just such a unique take on a zombie story that you just don't see anywhere else. So I do recommend this one. It is first and foremost a horror book, but it definitely has those science fiction elements, and I just thought it was incredibly fascinating. If you enjoy either genre and are okay with a slightly gruesome book, this is one that I would definitely recommend. It's very character focused, so you really get attached to the characters, which I think is really important in zombie fiction. And they were just very likable, but at the same time imperfect people, and you follow them along. And the book was just a really solid read, so I definitely would recommend it. Next, I read Turn of the Screw by Henry James. And this, of course, is the horror classic about a governess that goes to work for a family and take care of their children. However, when she gets to the place, she starts to believe that it might be haunted by some ghosts, and the story goes from there. And I picked up this book for a few reasons, one being the fact that I wanted to watch the adaptation that came out in January of 2020, and I know that was a while back, but I wanted to read the book first, even though the adaptation was quite modern and quite different, and I also wanted a chance to read Turn of the Screw by Ruth Ware because I knew that book was loosely based off of this one, and I've had a goal to read more horror classics. So I had a lot of reasons to read this book, and unfortunately it's almost a bad thing that I had so many reasons to finish it, because I probably should have DNF'd it or just not finished it because it was not working for me. I want to describe this book as very old-timey. I know it's a bad descriptor, but it kind of fits the book. I found the writing to be very stilted. It's just a very old classic. It's written around the beginning of the 1900s, and it's just not a book for me. If you're someone who really likes classics, not necessarily even horror classics, but just classics in general, you will probably get along a lot better with this one. I do enjoy the occasional classic, which is why I'm trying to push myself to read more horror classics, but they're not first and foremost my go-to genre. I do prefer modern fiction, just my personal preferences, and I just was not attached to the characters, I was not attached to the plot. And there also is the fact that while I do, of course, love horror, ghost fiction isn't something that particularly interests me, and this book is very much based around a potential haunting. So overall, this was a big miss for me. I did not enjoy it. Thankfully, the book is very short and I pounded through the audiobook, but I can't personally recommend it based off of my reading taste. But again, I know for people who love classics, they'll probably enjoy it a lot more because, I mean, it's a very beloved classic. It's just not for me. Now let's talk thrillers, and I finally got a chance to read Wonderland by Jennifer Hillier. I'm a huge fan of her as a thriller author. However, I have not had a chance to read this one before because it was not available through my library, but I got a subscription to Scribd, which has free audiobooks and ebooks for like $9 a month. And I do want to mention that if you're looking to try it out, I do have a link down below. It gives you 2 months free as a trial and you can cancel afterwards. But by using my link, it does give me a month free. I'm trying to stretch out my subscription as long as possible before I have to cancel it to stay within my book buying budget. But I do like Scribd because it gives me access to books that my library doesn't buy, and this is one of them. So all that being said, back to the book. This is about a town that the economy and the employment status of the town is very much centered around this amusement park called Wonderland. And the story specifically follows a police officer named Vanessa Castro who has moved to this town. She is escaping some mistakes she made back in her old precinct in Seattle and is now starting fresh and just starting over when she gets pulled into a case and needs to investigate. At the beginning of the story, you find out 2 things. One is that a man has climbed up a Ferris wheel in the amusement park. He took a selfie, posted it online, and then was never seen again. So this has just happened in the modern day, and we are piecing together what has happened to him. And the story also involves a body that has been just discovered in the park. And so you have these 2 mysteries going on, 1 dead body, 1 missing person, and Vanessa Castro is forced to go and investigate and try to figure out what is happening. And so this is a case of a thriller mystery. It is told in multiple perspectives, so you do get to find out what's going on earlier than in other books. So I would call this more of a thriller than if you're just looking for a straight up whodunit. You will kind of know what's going on partway through the story. And that's something that Jennifer Hillier really does in her books, and I personally like it, is that she puts you inside the head of the bad guys and you just get to see a little bit behind the scenes. I find this makes the book a lot creepier and just for me makes the book very exciting. But again, less mystery, less suspense, but at the same time, I still found the book incredibly addicting. I just flew through it. I wanted every opportunity to pick up this book, and I read it as quickly as I was able to and really enjoyed it. While most of the book is predictable, there are still a few twists and turns that he does throw in there that did throw me for a loop. So this is probably one of the more surprising of her books that I've read, and I'm just so glad that I finally got a chance to read it. The one thing I do want to mention is that I know a lot of people will pick up this book because they like carnival stories, especially carnival horror stories, and this is not one. It's definitely a thriller, not a horror. And while it is set in an amusement park, it really doesn't have those creepy carnival vibes to it. It doesn't have that atmosphere, but despite that, I loved it and would definitely recommend it to anyone looking for a new thriller book to read, especially one that in my opinion is very much underhyped. And finally, I want to talk about Bad Mummy by Tarryn Fisher. This is another one that I got access to through Scribd because my library has been letting me down in the thrillers department lately. But this is about a woman who a couple years ago had a miscarriage and has really never recovered from that. Her marriage fell apart, and now she has seen a woman on the street that has a daughter that would have been about the age of her own child, and she becomes obsessed with them. And not only that, but she becomes obsessed with this other mother, feeling that she is not doing a good job, that she is a bad mummy. And I really enjoyed those aspects to this book. If you know my reading taste when it comes to thrillers, I really enjoy reading from the perspective of a sociopath, reading about obsessive stalkers. It's just my thing. Those are my buzzwords. So I went into this one with high expectations. It is very well rated on Goodreads. And while it is underhyped, it's one I've been dying to check out for a really long time because I've heard great buzz about it. And unfortunately, it kind of fell apart for me. The beginning was promising. I did like getting to hear this woman's nasty thoughts about this other mother, especially if you are a mother yourself. It kind of dives into some of that like toxic mother culture. So if that's something you're interested in, you might want to check this one out. But for me personally, the story began to fall apart. And I need to keep this very spoiler free, but I will say that there are some narrative shifts that I didn't particularly like. I just don't think they were really effective in terms of storytelling. And I lost interest as the book went on. And for me, this book just lost its teeth and it just wasn't really the biting story that I wanted it to be. And towards the end, it just became very mediocre. So I didn't personally love this one. I wouldn't personally recommend it. To each their own if you want to try it for yourself. I know other people love this book. The ending is definitely going to be controversial, like the very ending of this book. I didn't love it, but I had already kind of lost interest in the book in general, so that definitely affected my overall opinion. So those are my quick thoughts on Bad Mummy by Tarryn Fisher. So that is it for this video, and you know the drill. I would love to hear your opinions about these books down below. Have I enticed you to pick any of them up? And also recommend to me some zombie fiction that you feel kind of breaks the mold and is a little bit different, or recommend me a thriller about an obsessive stalker besides You by Carolyn Kepnes. I've already read it, I loved it, but I need something else to read. So if you can recommend me one of those two things, that would be great. Otherwise, I will talk to you soon in another video. Okay, bye-bye.